Hey guys, welcome back to the Joy of Wrenching. My name is Les and I'm your friendly neighborhood mechanic. Today in the shop we got this really nice 2010 Dodge Ram 1500 pickup truck. It's four-wheel drive, and the reason why it's in the shop today is we've got some bad shock struts here. Okay, you can see all that goo on there. And in trying to take this off, I realized that we've got a bigger problem. This bolt that holds that strut to the lower control arm is seized inside of the bushing. It's a really common problem on these trucks, is that bolt gets rusted or corroded into that bushing, and sometimes it's really hard to get out of there. That's the problem we have on this truck today, and I want to show you a couple different ways to address it. So let's get into it. So as you can tell, this truck is no rust bucket, okay? It's a 2010, got a little surface rust here, but this thing is not. And we don't live here in Oklahoma in a really rusty climate. There's not a lot of salt used on the roads, and so these older trucks, they last a while. And that's not the reason why this bushing seems to be seized in here, not because of where you live. It's just a design flaw. I would say that they used a steel bushing and a steel bolt, and there's just such tight clearances inside of there that they almost rust together and weld together. And no matter what you do, you can get this nut off of here, but you can't drive that bolt out of here. It's just seized into that steel sleeve, and that sleeve is too big to fit through the hole of this shock, which I'll show you that here in a second. Let me get this nut out of the way. It's 24 mil. There we go. See that nut, that bolt there now should just come right on out the back there. And let's get the big fabulous hammer, as our friend Len over at TRQ likes to say. Out of there, okay? It is stuck. So what can we do? Let me show you. There's that steel bushing inside of there. You see that larger diameter around that bolt, and you can try and soak it, and I've tried this. Try and soak it with some penetrant. You can work it back and forth. You can turn it from the other side. It doesn't matter. What happens if it's this seized up, especially as you go to turn it around and around, is it'll break that rubber seal between the bushing and the steel, it'll break the steel sleeve free inside the rubber, and then it'll just turn and turn and turn. Again, not disconnecting from your bolt. So what do? How do you get this thing apart? Well, you're going to have to cut something, and there are a couple different ways you can do it. You can cut the ears off of the shock. Obviously the shock is shot. It's going to have to be replaced anyway. Or you can cut the bolt and trying to get inside of here and cut that bushing. Neither one is fun, right? But that's our options here. Some people have tried to put either a ball joint press or something like that and try and force the bolt through, and that can work in some cases, but as you can see here, there's just not a ton of space, and some of this lower control arm kind of gets in the way. So that's probably not the best method either. So let me show you what happens if we wail on this. I've got the nut here flush with the end of the stud of that bolt, and you can see it's pushing the guts of that bushing through a little bit, but not releasing the steel from that steel bushing inside there. I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully this will pick it up, but you can see where that bolt goes into that steel bushing, and it just will not release its bond. So as you wail on this side, you can see here the shock ear, or the ear on the bottom of this strut, is coming up and touching now this bushing sleeve. And on the other side, on this side here, and get some light, look how much we've got pushed out, okay? So it just won't come out of there. But doing this you see we're making a little bit of a gap right in here. Let me see if this light will stay here for you. We're making a little bit of a gap in there, and that could be where we try to cut through. And so we're just going to have to cut that bolt and or the ears off of this strut. And I think the bolt will probably be easiest. All right, so let's see how easy this is. We're going to use a Sawzall here. I've got my Milwaukee M12, and chalked up in here I've got a carbide toothed blade. Now these suckers are tough. I mean, this thing will eat. And so I'm going to put links in the description to these things. I'm not sponsored by any of this stuff. I just show you stuff that I like because it works. And if you use a link in the description, it's not going to charge you anything extra, but it does help our channel. So full disclosure there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get in here between that. We're going to try and cut that bolt between the bushing and our strut here. So we're going to try and get right in this gap here, and let's just see how this works. It may be a little hard for me to film while I do this, but I'll sure try. Here's what it looks like after it's been cut. You can see that the shock itself moved down just a little bit on this side. Now the other side, in order to cut it, we're going to have to see if I can get us some light on the subject. Okay, we're going to have to either come in here in between the shock and the bushing, but the steel bushing is all the way up against the shock, so we'll be cutting the steel bushing and the bolt if we try it that way. Another way would be to try and cut just this portion of the shock across here. Now if I had a plasma cutter or something like that, man, that would sure make this job a little easier, right? You just cut right there. But we're going to see if the Sawzall can cut through this ear of that shock right there as easily as it cut through that bolt. Okay, so it's obviously cutting through there. It's a little slow, some hardened metal, of course. I'm wondering if I could get maybe a cutoff wheel in this space here, and let's see if we can't fit something in there. It may be a little difficult though because of all of this control arm that's in the way of the area, but we'll see. So here's my my cutoff wheel in the grinder here. And I might be able to get a little tiny bite on this corner, but that's really just about all. It looks like it'll fit in there before it starts to touch on the frame there, or on the frame of the control arm. Now looking at another option here, just chalking up a cutoff wheel into something. And again, the diameter of this wheel, it might just barely kind of fit in here, but it's going to start touching the control arm pretty quickly as well. May be able to get a little nick on it before it starts to dig into the control arm. So not the best options, but you know, use whatever you got available to you. If you got a torch, use a torch. If you don't, then, you know, use what you've got to do, because there's no way to get this thing off without cutting it. It's just not got enough clearance really in there for us to get that tool up in there and cut it off. Now some people will try to come in here and cut the head off of the bolt as well, or you can come up under here like we were doing and try to, you know, cut that bushing some. So a couple of different ways to do it. You pick one that works for you. All right, I'm going to go back to our carbide saw blade here and see if we can get a bite in it. It's definitely cutting. It's not really much faster than cutting through the bolt, but again, you never know until you try. Boy, it feels like it just grabbed. It did. All right, so we're cutting through now. Now, because I haven't unloaded the suspension or anything like that, as I'm making this cut, the cut is trying to close up around and pinch on my blade, and so it's getting a little bit grabby there. You know, obviously, normally you would have all this stuff apart. I'm just showing you this process to save a little bit of time. But yeah, what I'm going to do now is probably take everything apart and then finish that cut, just so that I can get this blade in and out of there easier. All right, so let's go ahead and start taking all this stuff apart. First thing you want to do is just safely remove your ABS speed sensor wiring. You just pull this thing out from behind there, unlock your little red clip, squeeze the tab, and pull it apart. And then it's tethered to the upper control arm here with a little Christmas tree, so just get in there with a trim tool or something and pop that free. And then we'll go ahead and take off our caliper next, and we'll hang that up safely out of the way here. Now, to get the caliper off of here, it's held on to the knuckle with two 21mm bolts. So we'll bust those out, and then we'll just take the caliper with the pads still in it. We'll take the caliper off of here, and then we'll just hang it up somewhere like that. There's one. I take the lower one off first, just so that it kind of hangs on the upper one. I'll set these aside. Now, when you take off this upper bolt, you may need to just hold on to your caliper so it doesn't fall down and pull on your brake hose. You don't want it to tear it. There we go. Okay. Take that bolt out, set it aside. Now we can take our caliper off of the rotor. And then we'll just take it and we will set it over here, hang it up somehow out of our way, and in such a way as to not put any undue stress on our brake hose. Here we go. Now the caliper is out of the way, we can go ahead and remove our brake rotor, just to make it a little easier to deal with the knuckle and all of this. You know, all this is really heavy iron you're going to be swinging around here, so the less weight we can have hanging on stuff, the better. Next piece of this puzzle we're going to take apart is our upper ball joints nut here. And so this is a 21mm. Just come in here. There's that thing. You don't want to take it completely off. Leave it on a couple of threads, or take it off and then just screw it on back a couple of threads. And then we're going to release this upper ball joint from the knuckle there by whacking on this part right here with a hammer. Here's our big fabulous hammer. There we go. You see how it popped up and out, and that's why you leave that nut on there, because as it, you know, it could have popped up and out without that nut on there, and then this whole knuckle could swing down, damage your CV, or hit you, or something like that. So just safety first, guys. All right, next thing we want to do is get this outer tie rod loose, and so it's got a cotter pin and a castellated nut in this case. So you want to get that cotter pin out of the castellated nut, like so, and then we'll buzz off this nut. In this case, this nut is a 21 millimeter again. Just buzz that thing off of here, and like the other one, we're going to whack here in order to separate these two. There's a bond that you know, these ball joints and these tie rod ends and stuff, they're wedge shaped and they'll get stuck in there pretty good. So you got to give them a little love tap right here. There we go. And now you can take that nut off of there and pick this thing up and swing it out of the way if you'd like, or you can just leave it in there for now. We still got another thing to take apart, and that's our lower ball joint right here, and this is a 24 millimeter. So we'll go ahead and buzz that thing out a little bit. That one holds on good. Oh, that one's on there good. That's got a nylon nut holding it on, and it was tough to get off of there, so you definitely want to use an impact on that one, or a big breaker bar. 24 mil. We're going to leave it on a couple threads, and we're going to break the seal again by whacking on this thing with a hammer. Orient it such that you can get in there with a hammer real good, and make sure that you're not, you know, going to miss. You want to hit right here, or even over here, okay, as close as you can to that seal between that ball joint and knuckle. You want to be careful not to hit your backing plate or anything else that could be damaged. Ooh, this thing's on there. It's released. It's just that there's so much downward spring pressure that it's not allowing the two to separate. Let me get this pry bar in here. See if I can get it. See how it's released there? It just wasn't allowing it to come down because everything's still attached. But once we get all this stuff detached, then that'll allow this thing to move a little bit better. The other thing that's holding it up, the other thing holding this up is our sway bar end link here, which is putting spring pressure on holding this thing in place. So we'll go ahead and remove that sway bar end link now. All right, so let's go ahead and remove our sway bar end link, and that way we get a little bit more freedom for this lower control arm to ultimately come off. Now, there's an 18 mil nut. What'll happen is you'll be able to loosen it, and then the whole thing starts spinning. So what you need to do is get you something to hold this side of the shaft there, or you can get a hex. I think it's a 10 millimeter and hold this, but in my experience most of the time that is harder to hold on to than up here. So I like these kind of weird looking vice grip type pliers, and what they do is they grab hold of, you know, multiple points around whatever you grip them onto, and they just seem to hold better than regular old vice grips. So we'll clamp that on there, and then we'll get our 18, and off she comes just like that. Okay, so we're almost ready to start removing our knuckle from our lower control arm so that we can finish the job of getting our struts out and put the new ones in. We, in this case, are going to also replace the lower control arm, but regardless, one thing that has to come off is our axle has to be pushed out of the knuckle. It's held in with a big axle nut here. That's a 36 millimeter. So get you an impact again and buzz that thing off of there. You might have to hold it from turning a little bit. As you can see, you can do it with your hand. There we go. There's our nut. And in this case, there's no washer. It's kind of captured on the nut. And once you got that off, just make sure that you can push the axle shaft back and forth through the hub here. That way you know it's not seized. You can also reach around and grab hold of the the CV axle and pull it back, or you can tap on this end if you need to. See, there's a divot right here in the middle, so you can put a punch in the center of that thing to push on or to drive, you know, air hammer, whatever you want to use. Just be careful not to booger up these threads. And in worst case scenario, you can always take your nut, put it back on till it's flush with the front of that shaft and whack on it with a hammer right here to free it up. Then you can put a little bit of penetrant in the spline area right through here, and that'll help this stuff to move back and forth easier as well. Now everything's loose. Outer tie rod's loose, upper ball joint's loose, lower ball joint's loose, axle's loose. Now we're ready to go ahead and take our knuckle off of the lower control arm. So we'll go ahead and start doing that. We've left most of the nuts on, a couple of threads, and in most cases they'll be hand loose or hand tight. So you can just take these things apart and just either hang them out of the way somehow like this, if you can get it to stay someplace, or get you some bungee cords and pull it out of your way. Now we need to take this one loose. That's a 21 millimeter. It was already, you know, we broke it loose obviously, but you might have to put a little downward pressure on. See, that's got some upward force. It was boing, I wanted to spring out. So just be careful about that. I like to keep my hardware with everything. And this is a good time to feel out ball joints and things like that. Make sure that they're still in decent shape. Don't have any play. This one's got just a little bit. We might need to get a new upper control arm, because in this case we are doing a lower control arm. So now the lower control arm, we got our ABS wire detached from everything, so it will come with the knuckle. We're going to have to undo. Let me see if I can get you a better viewpoint here. How's that? Can you see good? All right. So we're going to have to undo this nut all the way here that's holding on our lower control arm, and then we're going to push our axle out the back of the hub knuckle assembly, and we're just going to drop everything out. So let me see if I can get this nut, what's left of it, in my hand, and no, I can't. So that's a 24 if you recall. Got that nylon on it, and it's just kind of hard to do by hand, so we'll buzz this thing. There we go. And be careful, that thing might try to fall on you. All right, now that this is undone here, let me see, make sure I got some good light here for you. There we go. All right, so all you do is just push on the axle, pull it through the back while you drop it off the bottom stud there. There we go. So now our knuckle is free, and we can set this over here out of the way. And your axle will be just sitting here floating around. And again, you can tie this thing out of the way or up or whatever, just so that it's not in the path of finishing off our shock removal here. Yeah, that lower ball joint is wallered out too. So we'll probably do a lower control arm and upper control arm. And here you can get a really good view of what we've done so far to our lower shock mount. And so we cut the bolt in here, and we are in the process of cutting this ear off of that shock mount, because to cut the bolt would mean cutting the bushing as well. It just seemed like a lot of meat to cut through. But we'll see how this thing goes. But we're almost there, and this is still attached because I didn't fully cut through there yet, and that's why this thing is not swinging down. The other thing that's keeping it from doing so is that our sway bar end link is still in here, and I've got this nut on here just in case it wanted to drop. It wouldn't be able to go very far. So we're almost cut through there on the ear of that lower shock mount. So let me set this somewhere where you can see, and we'll go ahead and finish that off. Now I have, you know, once this is disconnected, then this control arm can swing down out of the way, but I've still got it connected here with our sway bar end link so that it can't do that and cause any real damage. Now hopefully that'll be a good vantage point for you. Now let's finish this cut. Still with our same blade too. Ooh, felt it grab that blade, so that means that it's pretty much cut through. Yeah, that may be one of those things where we just finish this off by wedging something in there to break it free. We're going to put this little screwdriver in there, kind of as a wedge. Finish that little bit of nick off of there. There we go. All right, right there. So she's cut loose. All right, well now we know. Okay, so we did this side by cutting the bolt right through there. And then we did this side by cutting the shock ear right through there, because cutting through here would mean cutting through the bushing as well. To me, it seemed really about the same either way as far as difficulty. Maybe a little harder on this side just because of the tension that was on everything. But that's how, at least in this case, I got this one free. Now to remove the shock completely, we've cut off the bottom connection points because of that seized bushing. The only other thing holding this shock in place are 3 14mm nuts up top, and so you can use either a socket. You can usually get a socket in here, or a ratcheting wrench works really well in these cases. So I'm going to just use the ratcheting wrench. Once you break it free, if it's not too rusty, a lot of times it'll just come off by hand, these nuts. These are not. Get in here with our 14mm socket. Take these nuts off of there. Now, you want to leave one of them on there. And you want to leave one of them on there, one of those nuts up here. I'm going to leave this one in the front so you can see it. That way this shock doesn't just drop out and hit you in the foot or something like that. Go ahead and get it loose. While I loosen this last one, I'm going to hold on to the shock so that it doesn't fall on me. There we go. And there's our shock cut through. Here's a really good shot of that bolt where it goes through the steel bushing and those two being rusted together. I mean, you can't get that bolt out of that steel bushing. And turning it on the other side, all that happened was the steel bushing broke free from the rubber around it and everything was just turning. So what do you do now? You've got your shock strut off of here, but what do you do with all this mess, right? So, you know, there are a couple of different options. One, you can cut off what you need to press this bushing out of this lower control arm and then press a new bushing in. It's kind of a hassle. It's kind of a weird angle. There's all kinds of holes and things in the way. So I don't like that because it takes a whole lot of time. And that bushing, you know, let's say the bushing costs you 50 bucks and it takes you a day to get it out and get the new one in. Or you can get a whole control arm, which comes with a new bushing. All new bushings back here, which if this one's seized, chances are this one might be a little bit difficult too. And then it also comes with new ball joints. So in the case of this truck with 250,000 miles, it's a no-brainer. I'm gonna put new ball joints, new bushings, new bolts, everything on here and not fool around with it all weekend. So I'm wondering if instead of cutting the bolt out, now I've sawed this side off, but it's still attached back over here. If instead of removing that bolt that is seized inside the bushing at the lower shock strut mount, can I, since I am removing my control arms anyway, take out the control arm with the strut still attached to it instead of having to deal with figuring out how to kit that thing apart. So let's see how that works out. Alright, so much like the other side, I've already gone ahead and undone most of these connections, taken our brakes apart, loosened up our outer tie rod end, loosened up our upper ball joint, whacked on it, lower ball joints loose and whacked on it to release the knuckle here. So let's go ahead and take the axle, knuckle, everything out of the way, and then I'm going to loosen up, maybe even take the bolts out of our lower control arm, and then bring the lower control arm down with the strut still attached to it. Oh, let's go ahead and remove this upper ball joint. There we go. Keep our hardware together. Now remember, the other side had a lot of play in this ball joint. This one's got a little bit too, so we'll replace those as well. Let's get our lower ball joint. That's a 24 mil. Okay. All right. Now we can take our knuckle off, so we're going to push our axle out, and it just slides right off. There we go. Set that aside. Now our axle's out of the way, and I think if we undo our three 14mm nuts up here holding the top of this strut, undo these mounting points of the lower control arm, the thing ought to just slide right out, right? We'll find out, won't we? We'll find out together. So 24mm wrench to hold the front, 24mm nut on the back. I've already marked where these are for the alignment. Okay. That. Same on this one. I'm going to hold the front, and the nut is towards the back of the vehicle. Okay. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and I've taken the 3 nuts off of the top up here. Well, I've taken 2 of them. I've left 1 up there. That way I can control when this thing comes down. Get this over here so you can see. All right. So these control arm bolts can come off. This one. Again, I'm going to keep the hardware all together. Set that down here for the front. And let's do the same for this back one. Okay, there we go. There's the bolt for the lower control arm in the back. Let's put it together with its hardware. Now, the lower control arm can come out of its perch. There it is. See that? Lower control arm is swinging free. Hopefully that's picking it up. The only thing holding this thing up is the one 14mm nut right here. So I should be able to just support this, take this nut off, and down comes the whole kit and caboodle. And that saves us all that hassle of trying to cut this bolt or cut the bottom of the strut off, all that other hassle. All right, let's get this thing off of here. It's gonna be a little heavy for one arm. You guys better be impressed. All right, here we go. There's that, and look at there. Cool, we did it. There we go, that is the easy way. And here on the Joy of Wrenching, we're all about doing things the quick, easy way. Save you time, save you money. All right, quick review of what I've done. On the passenger side here, I went through the hassle of cutting through our seized bolt and cutting through one of the ears of the bottom of the strut here. Just to see, you know, how hard is it to remove it that way. And then I removed all the rest of the parts and dropped our control arm. Now to see if it saves time, I decided on the other side here, let's not cut through the bolt. Well, I did cut through this half, but the bolt's still in there, obviously. Let's not do that, and I didn't have to do that, and you wouldn't have to do that either. And can the control arm come out with the strut attached? Now, if you're going to reuse your control arm, obviously you're going to have to get this apart. But in our case, we're not. We've got new control arms and new bolts and everything that's going to go into this vehicle. So it was just easier, leave the strut attached, disconnect it from the strut tower up here, and just drop the control arm and the strut as a unit. Now to get these control arms to come down, we're going to have to take them off of the sway bar in links here. And since both sides need to come off, I find it easier just to go ahead and remove the sway bar completely, and that way this is not in your way whenever you go to do this job. So in order to remove the sway bar, you just undo the end links and then take off two 15mm bolts here on each one of these perches, and it'll just come right down. There we have the sway bar undone. You just lift it up out of the lower control arms and get it out of your way. Okay, now that our sway bar is out of the way, the only thing holding our lower control arm in are going to be these bolts here, the cam bolts for the lower control arm to the frame. It's a good idea to go ahead and mark where these little holes are against the frame on all of the four corners, including the back side. There's a little line there, so you can mark that line, and then also on the frame. That way, when you go to put this thing back together, you'll be able to get the alignment as close as possible to what it was when it rolled in the shop. And that way it won't eat up your tires on your way to the alignment shop. You will need to get your car aligned anytime you take the suspension apart, especially to this level. And in this case, we're taking the control arms completely off and everything. So the only thing that's going to be really hanging here are these things right tethered out of the way. All right, next step in removing these lower control arms is going to be to loosen these cam bolts here. And so we're going to take this 24mm nut loose on this side, and we're going to hold the front, which is 24mm also. Now as we do that, there's nothing else holding the control arm in place, so it's going to want to swing down. And so I've just put a bungee here to kind of keep it from swinging down and hit me. And we'll go ahead and start this process. Let me see if I can get you in a place where you can see good. There we go. Okay. 24mm on the back side, 24mm on the nut. There we go. There it is. And luckily, in our case, this is not all frozen and corroded in place like these bushings were for the lower shock mount. And we'll go ahead and undo the other one here, also 24mm front and back. Good. All right, so we've got these bolts nice and loose. We'll go ahead and take the nut off and take the cam washer type thing off of there. Goes like that. And then we can just pull the bolt completely out the front. And I'm going to keep these together. That way I know where it goes. We'll just keep these together, set these aside. You're going to be reusing those if you can. Go ahead and get this back one here undone. Push it through. There we go. Again, keep it together. Nice. And we should be able to just wiggle our control arm free. There we go. And since I tied it up out of the way, we'll go ahead and untie it now. It's safe to just take it down. And there we go. There's our old control arm out of the way. All right, quick comparison of our old versus our new. And in this case, we're using some Moog parts. They make really good suspension parts. So the old one is aluminum. The new one is cast iron. These Moog parts, and I'll put links in the description to all this stuff, are designed to replace the aluminum or cast iron lower control arms. We're going back with the cast iron. The new ones come with new ball joints, new bushings already installed in all the corners, same mounting point here for our sway bar end link. And the cool thing is, remember, we had to cut off this bolt. Well, this particular Moog comes with a new shock strut mounting bolt. So we'll go ahead and go back up in with these parts into these areas here. If there's any kind of corrosion, you want to clean that up. Just make sure that everything is nice and ready for the new parts. And again, we'll just hang this up out of our way. In our case, the cam bolts on the lower control arm where they go through the frame were still in good shape, so we can reuse those. But a lot of times you'll get corrosion along this surface here, and they'll get really rusted into place. So, you know, you can get you a new set of bolts. And, you know, I marked this with a little white dot here by the circle and just a white line over the line that's pressed into this side. Now the new part has that same line pressed into that side and the same circle on this side. So you don't have to have them marked. You'll know where these go. The markings are more important that you put here on the frame to line it all up than it is on the bolts themselves. Time to go in with our new part. So we'll go ahead and get it. And remember, there's a left and a right with these lower control arms, and you want to make it such that the ball joint, lower ball joint, is pointing down. All right, get your bolt, get it ready. If there's a lot of corrosion in these pockets right here, you might need to kind of clean these up, put some grease in there or something like that, just so that these things go back in a little easier. Then just stick your bolt through there. There we go. And then I'm going to get the other bolt in the back. So remember, the nut side of the front bolt is towards the back, and also towards the back on this back bolt. So head of the bolts is going to be towards the front of the vehicle. The nuts on these bolts is going to be towards the back of the vehicle. Get your little cam washer, and it goes in there a certain way, and you'll feel it go on there. And then our nut. These cam washers have kind of a hex feature on them, and so they don't sit flush until you get the right oriented the correct way. All right, like that. Now, once you've got these things in place, we need to rotate these parts to line up with our markings that we made earlier on the frame. Once those things are all lined up, then you can tighten it up in place. Obviously this will be rotated up there. We're going to rotate it up there and we're going to hang it, and then we're going to just snug these things up to where the markings match where it was before. That way it's as close as possible to the alignment so that we can drive it to the alignment shop after this repair. All right, so I've just gone ahead and bungeed the lower control arm up into place. You know, it doesn't have to be perfectly right height or anything like that, but just at a place where I can hold it up while I work on it. And what we're going to do now is we're going to orient our cams back to where they were. So you can just use a 24mm wrench and turn that to where that marking that you made before matches on the frame. And if you notice, whenever this front side is lined up, the back side will also be lined up. And so now we can tighten down this nut here. And it's a good idea to put a little Loctite on it or something like that, just that way it can't ever vibrate loose. Now you don't want to, you know, it doesn't want to be permanent, because obviously the alignment shop's going to use these to make some adjustments. Just one more thing you want to keep aware of is this washer that's part of that bolt needs to fit in between these little ledges that are in the frame there. That way it sits flush against the frame. And same thing on the back side. You've got these little ledges. Make sure that your washer is sitting down in between them before you go to tighten it up. Nuts are snugged up. You don't want to tighten them yet, because we want to wait until this thing is at right height. That way we don't mess up our bushings inside of here. So you'll put this thing at right height. You could lift it up there just like this by hand right now and tighten it if you wanted, or you can wait till it's at right height and tighten them. But these get tightened to 150 foot-pounds, okay? And I'll put links down in the description below for all the different torque settings for all of the different parts of this, so you don't have to come back through the video and try to find where I say it here. So in our case, these upper control arms, the ball joint here has a little bit of play in it, and it's all floppy, and then it's got click, 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 up and down motion. So if you've got that, you're gonna need to replace the ball joint. It's part of a upper control arm. Since this truck's got 250,000 miles or so, it'd be nice to get new ball joint, new bushings. Again, everything's getting refreshed down below. Might as well do this as well. So to get this off is super easy, but before we take this off, I want you to notice something. You see how I'm pulling down on it and it springs back? This is where it's tightened to. This is the ride height. And the bushings get squished inside the frame right there by this bolt. And what you need to do is, when you put this back together, we need to set this back to that ride height before we tighten these bolts. And to get these bolts out, real easy. If you notice, the bolt has a little tab on it. That tab is going to keep it from spinning so that you can remove the bolt itself from this side. That little nut has got a tab on it. If you don't want to wait on that tab to spin around and hit the frame and stop moving, you can just hold the nut on this side with a 21mm and then undo the bolt from this side with an 18mm. These things are going to be on pretty tight, so you might just need to double up, get a little extension or a little bit of leverage to break it free. Oh, it is on there good. Let me get my flashlight out of the way here. Oh. Wow, yeah, that is tight. There we go. But you can use a socket. There's enough room, and this plastic here will move out of your way so that you can get in here with a socket or whatever. But you can see here how that little tab has started to move. The nut started to move around. So look right back in here. There's a tab welded to that nut, and as you turn it, you see how that tab is going to go, and eventually it will come in contact with the frame and not allow that nut to spin any longer. And now you can just turn the bolt and it'll start to come out. Sometimes these things can be on there pretty darn good. And like I said, if that tab is annoying to you, it starts moving around like it is right now, you can get you a 21mm wrench and hold the nut itself. Let's get this other side broke loose again. 18 on the front and a 21 on the nut back here if you want to hold the nut in place. Now see, once the pinching, the tightness of these bolts is released, it'll just flop around like that. And so again, whenever we go to put it back together, we need to make sure that we put the new one at this level ride height before we tighten these bolts up. There we go. Now it's loose enough we can do it by hand. I'm going to hold on to this nut just so it doesn't fall down in the nether regions someplace. There it is. So that nut has got that captured tab onto it. So we'll set this aside. You can leave this in there, you can pull it out either way. Doesn't matter, just keep these two together. Okay, we'll go ahead and remove this last bolt here. Hold on to the nut so it doesn't go flying. There we go. Now, let me hold on to this thing while I remove that bolt. And there it is. Upper control arm is off. Installing the new upper control arm, just repeat the process of taking it apart. Feed your bolt through there. Get your nut with a little tab that captures it. Just screw it on there. And then come over here to the other side. And do the same thing. Again, this you can just push this back, give yourself plenty of room, real easy. Just put that through there, put the nut on it, get it started by hand. There we go. And then we'll just snug these up and we'll put this at this ride height and then we'll tighten these things down, and I'll give you a torque spec down in the description below. Now it's time to put our new strut assembly in place, and the way that you know how to put it back in is you know that this side has to fit on that bushing, and if you look up inside of this strut tower you'll see there's 3 holes and there's one in the front, and so find whichever one of these bolt holes or whichever one of these attachment bolts is also on the same side as this opening. That way you'll know that it's lined up. And so you just go inside. Now this one's got a leveling spacer on it. Yours may not, obviously won't have that unless you add a leveling kit like I'm doing here, but doesn't matter. Either way you'll have 3 studs here, and you get the one and get it started right into the front hole like that, and you'll see that down here this will line up. And if you left this lower control arm bolts where they're attached to the frame loose, you can move this just a little bit. Just set it in place. And then you can get your attaching nuts and bring it up here and go ahead and get it started on the 3 studs at the top of our strut tower. You see they're sticking through, so we can get our attaching nuts and just get those started on there. That way this thing won't fall back through. Once we have the nuts up top tightened, then we can move this and adjust this until we can line up our bolt hole so that we can run our new bolt through the lower shock mount. Alright, so now that the upper portion of our strut is in place, we can go ahead and reconnect to our lower control arm this mount here. Now it should be facing this direction, but if it's cocked a little bit to the side like that, you can just twist it a little bit. Sometimes put a screwdriver or a punch or whatever through these holes, and it's got just a little bit of wiggle and turn. That way you can line it up to where it'll straddle this bushing, and then we can run our new bolt that came with our Moog kit through our bushing through here and then put the nut on it. Let me see if I can do this here just by sheer force. I need to push this into place, control arm up and pushing back on my shock, and then I've got to get them lined up and stick the bolt in at the same time. It's a little bit of a tricky job, but just take your time, and you can put a jack underneath here if you need to, kind of raise it up a little bit, and I think I will since I'm working by myself. Now you can probably get a helper to push up the control arm. It's not got a lot of force. I don't have a whole lot of weight resting on it, but just because I'm working by myself, this just makes it a little easier to line everything up the way that it needs to be. And so we can go ahead and put in our bolt that came with the Moog control arm. You just line up the holes, slide her through. Ah, there we go. And you can tap it through with a little hammer or whatever, get it to go all the rest of the way. Just like so. And like I said, there's really no stress on this. It was just to kind of hold the weight of it up while I did it by myself. But there we go. And get our nut, get that started on there, and then we will tighten this, and again I'll give you the torque specs down below. So there we have it, guys. Got us a new strut in place, new control arm, and fixed the problem with this darn bolt that was seized into that bushing. So this is the easy way, believe it or not. I mean, it's kind of a job, yeah, I get it. But this is way easier than trying to cut that bolt out of there, trying to press that bushing out of there and press a new one in. And if your car's got a ton of miles on it, like this one does, it's just good practice to go ahead and replace all those bushings, the ball joint, all that anyway. So just replace the lower control arm and save yourself a whole lot of time, a whole lot of money, and a whole lot of heartache. If this helped you guys out, do me a favor, help me out as well. Hit that like, that subscribe, and leave me a comment down below. I really appreciate that. I appreciate y'all's time today. Y'all have a wonderful week, and God bless.